Following the fatal shooting of Robert Kennedy on June 5, 1968, the initial assumption of a straightforward assassination by a lone disgruntled young Jordanian immigrant was questioned by any number of those present and ultimately by the public in the United States Congress. The shooter, Sirhan Sirhan, was immediately captured and remains alive and imprisoned to this day. However, though Sirhan pleaded guilty in court to the shooting, he said at that time and continues to maintain that he has no memory of the shooting. Combined with an uncontrollable crime scene and statements by witnesses that conflict with the findings at autopsy, there is little wonder that thoughts of errors, lies, and conspiracies have continued for decades and sparked multiple investigations, which have generally raised more questions than answers. All seem to agree that Sirhan was positioned in the pantry directly in front of Kennedy as he advanced through the swinging doors leading from the kitchen. Sirhan began to fire his revolver when Kennedy was about 18 inches from the gun. Kennedy may have turned to his left just as the first shot was fired, striking him just behind the right ear. As Sirhan continued to fire, Kennedy was struck twice in the upper lateral part of back and one shot which penetrated his jacket and hit a bystander's forehead. Sirhan continued to fire his 8-shot revolver as he was wrestled to the floor. In the immediate aftermath, Sirhan's revolver was empty and there were 6 casualties, 2 apparent bullet holes in the ceiling and 2 or more holes in the swing doors immediately behind Kennedy. All of this from an 8-shot revolver. The 2 ceiling holes were probed, but only 1 bullet was found. The swinging doors and their frame were removed, transported to police headquarters, and then lost or discarded. In 1975, a panel of 7 ballistic experts concluded that the 3 bullets, or fragments of bullets taken from Kennedy's body, were fired from the same gun, but they could not conclude that they came from the revolver used by Sirhan. Adding to the confusion was the finding by the medical examiner that burned powder stippling around the fatal head wound indicated the gun was 1 to 3 inches from Kennedy's head. However, the stippling pattern from Sirhan's gun and ammunition was not tested at varying distances. Multiple witnesses said that Sirhan was more than 1 foot from Kennedy. In addition, several sound recordings from inside the hotel have been examined by a number of audiological experts who disagree on the number of shots, ranging from 8 to 13. The most recent published opinion, that of Edward Primo in 2019, using the computer program iZotope RX, indicate only 8 shots. If there were more than 8 shots fired in the pantry, it would indicate a second shooter. The most likely suspect for a second gunman was a hired armed security guard, Thane Eugene Caesar, who entered the pantry at Kennedy's right arm and fell to the floor with Kennedy after Sirhan began firing. Eyewitness John Pilger stated his belief that Caesar had pulled his revolver and fired 1 or more times. Caesar told the LAPD that he was carrying a .38 caliber Rome revolver, but that he had once owned a Harrington and Richardson .22 caliber gun that he sold before the assassination. However, upon further investigation, the LAPD found the buyer of Caesar's .22 gun, who produced a signed sales receipt dated 3 months after the assassination. Caesar's statements were taken at face value by the LAPD, and in the immediate period after the shooting, his hands were not tested for gunshot residue. The .22 caliber bullets and fragments from the victims or the crime scene were never compared to Caesar's .22 caliber H&R revolver. In short, Caesar was never seriously investigated by the LAPD. Caesar had the opportunity and the means to shoot Kennedy, but no clear motive. He was not subjected to a polygraph examination until 1975, during which he denied any involvement in the assassination. The expert who administered the test stated that he found no evidence of deception. Thane Eugene Caesar moved to Manila in the Philippines, and while there refused an interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In fact, Caesar's potential involvement was never thoroughly investigated, and he died in Manila in 2019. Multiple witnesses at the Ambassador the night of the assassination reported seeing a young Caucasian woman with brown hair, dressed in a white dress with dark polka dots. The most prominent was the report by Sandra Serrano, a campaign worker who had gone out to the fire escape to avoid the uncomfortable warmth of the ballroom. She reported that just before the end of Kennedy's speech, a group of 3 persons, including a small man she later identified as Sirhan, another young man in a gold-colored coat, and the lady in the polka dot dress, came up the fire escape and entered the building. Serrano said that a few minutes later she heard increased crowd noise, and either an automobile backfire or gunshots, and the woman in the polka dot dress and the man in the gold coat exited the fire escape and exclaimed, "We shot him." Serrano asked who. The woman replied, "Senator Kennedy." Serrano later told LAPD officers that she had fabricated the whole story. Even later, Serrano recanted her denial to one or more journalists. Further, an LAPD investigator conducted sound tests on the fire escape where Serrano had been and determined that she could not have distinguished small caliber gunfire in the pantry from the crowd noise. Several other witnesses reported a woman in a polka dot dress in and around the ballroom. However, there was disagreement as to her size, the design of the dress, and even the color of the polka dots. The police presented a blonde young woman to the press who wore a light-colored polka dot dress. The dress had light-colored polka dots, and she did not fit the description given by several persons who claimed they had seen the brunette with the white dress with dark dots. A young woman who was an exotic dancer presented herself to LAPD as the polka dot woman. She was, however, a blonde and had worn an orange-colored polka dot scarf. In the final analysis, the woman described by most of the witnesses was never found, and no one could connect her with any physical evidence concerning the shooting other than having been seen at least once in proximity to Sirhan. Both were standing near a coffee urn before the shooting. No young man in gold coat was ever identified. The existence and actions of the polka dot woman remains unknown and of questionable significance. In 2006, British investigative reporter Shane O'Sullivan conducted his own research and produced a film entitled RFK Must Die, parts of which were aired on the BBC. O'Sullivan identified 3 men in the ballroom area as highly placed CIA operatives. These included David Sanchez Morales, Gordon Campbell, and George Ioannidis. Though these 3 are seen in the film taken in the ballroom, none were noted to be present in the kitchen or pantry where the shooting took place. The identities of these men have come into question as researchers Jefferson Morley and David Talbot discovered that the real Gordon Campbell had died 3 years earlier, and a number of family members and close friends of Morales denied that the man in was film was he. The men O'Sullivan identified as Campbell and Ioannidis were identified by LAPD as Michael Roman and Frank Owens, both sales managers for the Bulova Watch Company, which was conducting a convention at the Ambassador Hotel at the time of Kennedy's assassination. Other authors, as well as O'Sullivan, have suggested that Sirhan had been hypnotized and given post-hypnotic instructions to kill Kennedy, and then his brain was washed clean of any recollection or remnant of the process. The so-called Manchurian Candidate scenario after the book by Richard Condon. In support of this theory, Sirhan was extensively examined by Dr. Bernard Diamond, psychiatrist at Columbia University, who noted that Sirhan was exceptionally easy to hypnotize and noted that he was likely not suffering any serious mental illness. Dr. Diamond and I, in the late 1960s, opined that a subject such as Sirhan could be hypnotically induced to carry out actions he would otherwise not do, and that the hypnotic suggestion could be adequately hidden. He did, however, add that, over time, the hypnotic instructions could likely be uncovered. We have spoken with current international hypnosis expert Dr. Roxanne Erickson, who believes that post-hypnotic instructions can be implanted into susceptible subjects, but that it is likely that they could be uncovered in a few later hypnotic sessions. Sirhan has steadfastly denied, since day one, that despite confessing he killed Kennedy because the senator planned to give military aid to Israel, he, Sirhan, has no recollection of the actual event. In this regard, we also note that Sirhan was likely alcohol intoxicated at the time of the shooting. Sirhan's defense team chose not to use hypnosis by outside persons or group in his defense, rather claimed that Sirhan had diminished mental capacity due to his dreadful childhood experiences, his closed head injury, and possibly even his alcohol intoxication. In addition, Sirhan was not known to have any contact with the U.S. military, save for ROTC in high school, or any government agent or agency. The facts in the RFK assassination are sparse but significant. First, security at the Ambassador Hotel on the night of his assassination was near none. There were no screening procedures or control of who came or went. Second, the police response to a killing at an event of the size of that at the Ambassador was entirely inadequate to control or investigate the immediate scene or the witnesses. 3. The only other person known to possess a firearm at the event, Thane Caesar, was never seriously considered a suspect, despite having lied to the police regarding his owning a gun of the same caliber as that used in the killing. Further, the bullets removed from Kennedy's body were never matched to any of the guns known to be present at the scene. 4. Valuable evidence, the frame and doors to the pantry, were never forensically examined and were lost by the LAPD. 5. Witness accounts varied wildly, and some were admittedly fabricated. 6. Sirhan had motive, access, and opportunity. He owned and was in possession of a .22 caliber revolver, which he was seen to fire, at least in Kennedy's direction 8 times. He was competent to stand trial and admitted shooting Kennedy. 7. Several groups of investigators and experts have been impaneled by state, local, and the federal government, as well as news agencies and authors, to investigate the killing of RFK. None have produced definitive evidence implicating anyone other than Sirhan. The crime occurred almost 60 years ago. The Ambassador Hotel is gone, as are most of persons central or peripheral to the crime and investigation. The theories proposing governmental intelligence agencies, hypnosis and brainwashing, as well as many of the witnesses and the mystery woman in the polka dot dress, all have evidence, but not good evidence. Every professional investigator knows that real, reliable evidence is reproducible and generally undeniable. Much like the killing of his older brother, President John F. Kennedy, we will likely never fit all the pieces into a true and precise story.